Alright, so let's dive into this week's Magic the Gathering deck delve. So, if those of you that are new to the channel, both on YouTube or Twitch, I weekly live stream talking about one of my countless decks that I have. I probably will eventually run out of decks to talk about, but as I have over 50, I've got a year's worth of them to speak about, and there's always more being made. So, this week I'm talking about a special deck, and I do want to give you a little bit of history of where the origins of this deck came from before I talked about it. So, and some little bit of information about it that might help you if you want to recreate a deck similar to this. So, this deck dates back to 2010, where I was on vacation with some friends. We rented a rural cabin together in Maryland, and I went to a local Walmart to pick up, I wanted flip-flops, and saw Duel Decks, Phyrexia versus Coalition. This was the first Duel Decks product, as I had just recently been getting back into Magic, since I hit Scars of Mirrodin, which was going to come out soon, in the next X months, and that's where I really dove back into Magic. But I started picking up a couple of things during the first Zendikar block, which is when this came out during. Phyrexia versus Coalition, they were interesting decks, had a couple of cards I remembered, because pretty much last time I played was during Invasion, so decade of fun ago about there. And I eventually ended up taking both decks, and though they were both fun, combined them together into one deck. And that is where this deck came about, which I have aptly titled Remanents of the Coalition. Now, truthfully speaking, this deck here, which I have built, is 100 cards. So that's an important thing about it, what we want to talk about. It is exactly the same amount of cards as a commander deck, but it has repeats. There are 13 cards in here which are repeats. So this is very close to being a commander deck. And most of those cards could probably be replaced with similar cards which are maybe not as good, but function in the same way. That's an important thing. A bunch of them are lands. Only 6 of these cards are non-land. 7 of them are non-basic lands. Those 7 non-basic lands could probably easily be replaced. The 6 cards also easily replaced, because again, most of those are also commons and uncommons, because 60 out of these 100 cards are rares or mythic rares. That's how this deck is evolved. In fact, I have 6 cards in this deck which are back from the original Phyrexian versus Coalition Duel Decks, and their lands. 4 swamps, 2 forests that are from that original deck, or decks I should say, because I combined the 2 of them together, are all that's left in here. All the normal cards have been replaced over the past 7 years, and this deck continues to be evolving. So that is the history of how this deck came to be. And I kept editing it. And basically, if I had leftover green, red, or black cards, I threw it in here. So this is technically a modern deck, is the easy way to say it. This is definitely a modern one. I might not technically qualify for modern because I ended up with 2 soul rings in here because of extras, and I can't remember if they are banned or restricted in most things. They might be. Hard to remember. They're fine in Commander, but that's where I got them from. Extra Commander decks that I broke down. Let me take off this coat, because I don't really need it at the moment, and I'm getting a little sweaty. So, why don't we dive into the cards that are in this set, though, in this deck, though, and we can talk about them a little bit. So, let's start off with the first one. We have an Artisan of Kozilek. I got this one from the Archenemy sets. When it enters the battlefield, you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, when you cast it. So I play this. It's expensive, but there's a lot of mana ramp and ways of getting extra cards out quicker. So a couple of expensive creatures do, well, things are a little bit more on the expensive side. Annihilator 2, that's a fine thing to do. Annihilator, having an opponent sacrifice something. 10-9, also fine. But this resurrects something to the battlefield with you, and that's the real reason that it's as good as it is in this set. Next up, Bloodgift Demon. And I am displaying most of the time the correct version of the cards over on the side here. I'll let you know if there's a version that doesn't show up in the Gatherer, because there are some promos and stuff that I've put in this here that don't show up in the Gatherer, and that's what I was using to get all the images for today. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, lose 1 life. I don't really have a lot of life gain in here, but the extra card draw is very useful here, so hence why Blood Gift Demon is in here. Now let's talk about one of the ways we can gain life. Chancellor of the Dross. It's a flying lifelink 6/6. When it's in your opening hand, you may reveal that card. If you do, beginning at the first upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain life equal to that. Great in multiplayer. Decent in an opening hand anyway. It is expensive, but it is a lifelink, so it's another way of gaining life. Another rare from New Phyrexia. Drana, Callistra Bloodchief. 4/4 flyer. For X and 2 black, I'm sorry. Target creature gets -0, -X until end of turn, and she gets +X, +0 until end of turn. So she murders something and gets bigger. This is basically a way of just killing off stuff. That's basically it. She murders things. Simple as that. It's another way, it's creature removal. We've so far have Resurrection, card draw, life gain, creature removal. All in rare form. All very useful. Harvester of Souls. You know what? I think I can increase the size of this to make it easier for me to see if this works. There we go. I can do that. Makes it a little easier for me to switch between tabs. Don't mind the truck that's outside. That shouldn't be traveling on the road out there because that's not a very good truck route. Shouldn't be a truck route. Trucks travel on it. Oh, I've dropped some frames, too, still today. Jeez. Not as bad as last night. If you caught the PUBG stream, last night's frame rate drop was terrible. It's not going to show up on YouTube because it's so bad. Harvester of Souls. It's a death touch, 5/5. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. Means something of opponent's dies. When something of you own dies, you get a card. Very useful that way. Reaper of the Abyss. Flying, Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, destroy target non-demon creature. Now, granted, you might have to kill off some of your own things, but I have token production in here, which would not be demon tokens, just to make sure that I don't have to worry about that problem. And if something just died in general, it doesn't say creature you control died. If I kill off something of my opponents, it kills off something else of my opponents that was there. It just murders stuff. Reaper of the Abyss is good that way. Skirktag High Priest. Guess what? Another one I have here. It's got another Morbid. Tap 2 untap creatures you control. Put a 5/5 black demon with flying in the battlefield. Creature has to die this turn. Again, I murder off something of my opponents with something like the Dralna. What's that her name? Drana. And then I could activate this by tapping 2 other creatures. I get a demon. Comboing up a lot of stuff in here that works very well together. The Skirktag High Priest is definitely a good one to have. Helikite Charger. Hey, look at this one here. A flying haste, and when it attacks, you may pay 5 and 2 red to untap all attacking creatures that attack this phase and get additional combat. So for 7 mana, I can attack again with this one, and it's a flying haste. Now, that doesn't seem super great, but I have a way of making this that I could attack infinite times, which we'll show you a little later in the show when we get to it. I put these in a specific order that I liked for working on this deck. We go through creatures, then it was sorceries, instants, planeswalkers, enchantments, artifacts, and then the lands. I kind of ordered everything like that by type and then by color. So the color would be set detail, but since it's not all the same set, you know, I came up with my own thing. But Helikite Charger is very good there, and Infinite Attacking is also very good there. Helikite Tyrant. More Helikites, more dragons. Red always has some great dragons in it. So it's a flying trample 6/5. When it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. If I control 20 or more artifacts, I win the game. The alternate win condition's interesting. I have a bunch of artifacts. I could theoretically win the game with this. It's not that important. The stealing all the artifacts is really where the goodness, the great parts of this creature come in. Because if an opponent gets some really awesome artifacts, I can steal them. Plain and simple. I just take them all. Mine. Inferno Titan. Oh, the Titans, I never had a great place for a lot of them. Inferno Titan ended up here. For a red, it gets +1/+0 until it enters a 6/6, and when it enters the battlefield or attacks, it does 3 damage divided among any 1, 2, or 3 target creatures or players. Basically, every time it comes to play or attacks, I do 3 damage, divided where and when I want it. I can do it to one creature, 3 damage, 2 to one to another, 1 across 3 different targets. And this includes both creatures and players, which means I could burn Planeswalkers with the Inferno Titan. I didn't get all the Titans, but the Inferno one I did manage to get and threw into this deck. Kamal, Pit Fighter. I actually have a different version of him. I have a foil version from the special Planeswalker decks, that the Planeswalker decks are never found in the Gatherer, and they never actually had the Planeswalkers in them. But they got this nice M symbol here. Let me see if I can get close enough and it gets it not to... I don't know if you guys can see that M symbol, but it's got a little M symbol in a circle here representing it. But anyway, Kamal's really good. Haste, 6/1. So that would be a really good big attack. Or you could tap into a 3 damage target creature or player. He's Super Timmy. That's a great way of saying it. When red became like the Timmy color, he became Super Timmy. Mana Charge Dragon. Flying Trample 5/5. Join forces. When it attacks or blocks, each player, starting with you, can pay X mana, and it gets plus X plus O, where X is equal to the total amount of mana paid by all players this way. So it's not only can I make it bigger, everyone could make it bigger, and it could just murder anybody. And it's a flying trample, which is always wonderful. Any kind of pump up damage and trample is really mean, and I like it. Moonveil Dragon. Oh, Moonveil Dragon. I end up with 2 of these. I got one in my normal red deck, which we haven't talked about yet. But it's flying 5/5, and for a red, each creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So it's team-based fire breathing. Moonveil is really good. Shame it hasn't been reprinted yet, but I can accept that this is the form that we get it in. And I got 2 of them, so I ended up with 1 in here of the Moonveil Dragons. Moonveil Dragon, no. Scourge of the Throne. So it's a 5/5 flying. It's got Dethrone, which when it attacks the player with the most life, or tied for the most life, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, so it gets bigger. And when it attacks for the first time each turn, if the attacking player has tied for the most life or has the most life, you untap all attacking creatures and get an additional combat phase. So this is another way of getting an additional combat phase, except without paying mana. And it would get bigger each time it attacks anyway. And it's only once, particularly for this one. So it's not as, in a way, as good as the Hellkite Tyrant, since I said I could get infinite turns. But it's still pretty good. Tyrant of Discord. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses a permanent he or she controls at random and sacrifice it. If it's a non-land permanent, it is sacrificed this way. Repeat the process. Okay. Easy way to say this is, I put it into play. Target opponent starts sacrificing things. They will keep sacrificing things until they sacrifice a land. It's that simple. Each time they sacrifice something that isn't a land, they have to sacrifice something else. And it's at random. Meaning that you have to figure out, especially if they have tokens, figuring out at random how to do it can be kind of difficult. But the Tyrant can wipe out armies. And that's the good thing about it, is you can just play it and be like, wipe out a whole lot of stuff I don't want to deal with. Urbrask the Hidden. Of the Praetors, he's the one I like the least. So he ended up in, like, no decks, and I did get a copy of him. So he ended up in here. Creatures you control have haste, and creatures your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped. Those aren't bad abilities, but they were never good enough to me to just throw into here. Hence why he ended up over here. Because he's still good, just not good for any of my designed decks. And I wanted to put him somewhere, and this deck, actually, I look at before I look to my commander decks. So this one gets a lot of stuff before the commander decks get them. Hence why it's got a bunch of dragons and demons in here, which are saying, oh, that Angels, Demon, and Dragons deck you talked about would have had wonderful use for some of these here. But this one comes first, because this one is the older deck, and I like it kind of better, too. Again, I have cut it down countless times and cut out stuff from it, and it's at 100 cards right now. Alright, let's move on, though. Let's move on to some of our green. Engulfing Slagworm. This is the first time we have 2 of them. I have 2 in here. As I said, there are 6 extra cards in here that are non-land cards that would have to be switched out to make this a commander deck. And this is one of them. It's the almost commander deck that I have. Engulfing Slagworm, when it blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, destroy that creature, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. And this occurs before it deals damage. It just eats stuff and you gain life. I have 2 in here, because I ended up with a bunch of Engulfing Slagworms. I somehow ended up with a whole bunch of them. So putting them in some places like here, where they ended up, were good. And they are useful. They are very useful. So, it's a way to gain life and to get rid of opponent's creatures. Hence why it is a good one. Genesis Hydra. It's cost you X, 2 green. When you cast it, you reveal the top X cards of your library, and you put a non-land permanent with a converted mana cost of X or less onto the battlefield from among them. Shuffle the rest back in your library. It enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters. So not only do you get a big XX creature for 2 mana, you get something else from the top of your library. If I paid 20 mana, I get to choose one thing with a converted mana cost of 20 or less from the top 20 cards of my library and put it onto the battlefield. Genesis Hydra, you get something else for free, and that's why it's good. Oh look, it's a Predator Ooze. It's indestructible. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. When a creature dealt damage by Predator Ooze dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Predator Ooze is a very good one. It's an answer to a lot of things because it is indestructible. Because it does keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Predator Ooze is useful that way, and hence why it ended up in here, just to murder and crush things. Primeval Titan. When it battlefields or enters the battle, it's a 6/6 trample. Blah blah blah. When it enters the battlefield, see, that's what you miss when you're watching some of my videos on YouTube that are the non-live streamed ones. When I mess up with words and re-record stuff, you get to enjoy it here. Anyway, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for up to 2 land cards, put them in the battlefield, tapped, shuffle your library. Not basic land, lands. Because the vast majority of lands here, 21 out of the 33 lands, are non-basic, you can search for them with this beast here. Primeval Titan is very good. And unfortunately, I do have it in the deck that it works with of my other decks. I don't have a lot of decks that it really functions well in because I have other ways of getting lands out, and this is really better if you do have a large amount of non-basic lands. It balances out more. So, Primeval Titan's great, and I was glad I got an extra one, and I threw it in here. Protean Hydra. So it's another X creature, enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. If it would be dealt damage, prevent that damage and remove that many +1/+1 counters, but whenever a +1/+1 counter is removed from it, put 2 at the beginning of the next end step. So if it's dealt damage, you remove that many +1/+1 counters from it. It gets smaller, but it doubles that at the end of your turn. So if it can live, doubles that many. And if you can play something on it or affect it with something that raises its toughness, because you prevent damage and then remove that many +1/+1 counters, even if it goes to 0, Protean Hydra can get really big, really mean, and you can protect it. That's why Protean Hydra is very good, because you can just raise its toughness. You can't get rid of it. Until then, maybe you can, if you plan it out well. Alright. Trestodon. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 non-creature permanents. For each permanent you destroyed that was put into the graveyard, its controller gets a 3/3 elephant. And it's a 9/9. Now, yes, I'm giving my opponent 3 elephant tokens. And up to 3 elephant tokens. But I can also target and destroy 3 key lands, 3 key artifacts, 3 key enchantments, 3 planeswalkers. Anything that's not a creature I can target and destroy with Trestodon, and that's why it's useful, because it's getting rid of 3 things which might be a threat to me and eliminating them. Granted, it's not creatures, but this is other than creature destruction. Verdant Force. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. Basically, If you're playing a multiplayer game, you get a lot of tokens fast because you take your turn, each of your opponents takes a turn, and each of their turns, I get a sapling also. So if I'm playing with 4 other players, by the time it rolls around to my turn again, I now have 5 saplings. And I only took that 1 turn. So you can just build them up and build up an army very rapidly. The more turns there are, the more of an army you have. Verdant Force is wonderful that way. And I love playing with the Verdant Embrace, which is the enchantment form of this. But in this case, I had the creature version. And this is another one of, like, similar to Kamal that's got the little M symbol on it. Like the Terastodon, it also has like a little, one of the little promo star symbols on it. So it's not an actual, it's not the one from, I think it's Commander Anthology that it was similar to this one. Both of these are foils that I have. Foil promos. Or in special cases, like the M symbol one for this one. So it's one of those Planeswalker decks that I talked about. I think the green one, there was one for each color. So that was the green one. Alright, let's move on from Verdant Force to Vertaloth the Ancient. I stopped talking about where all these cards came from at some point in time. But if you've been watching over here, the symbols are appropriate unless I say so. So if you recognize Magic the Gathering deck symbols, good on you. Good on you. Anyway, Vertaloth here. Vertaloth Boy is a favorite of mine always. It's been a favorite since he came out in Invasion. I used him back then, and I'm glad to still have a place to put him. I actually think I do have a deck that I put him in because I can have him go away and come back. Bring him back to my hand to cast him again. Effectively, when you cast him, you can pay a kicker, which is an extra mana cost. Kicker of X in this case. And whatever that X is, you put that many 1/1 green sapling creature tokens in the battlefield. So if I have like 20 extra mana, up to the 6 that it cost me to play him, I get 20 saplings. And he gives other sapling creatures and tree folks +1/+1, making my saplings mean. Well, at least a little bit mean. Now, you've seen our 3 colors here that are main 3 colors, but we have a splash of 1 color in here for 2 cards. You might say, why 2 cards? Because they're very good 2 cards. So we splashed in white. Just a little bit of white. And there's some land and other production that will produce it. Teriel, Reckoner of Souls. Teriel, we saw when we were in the Angel Demon Dragon deck. I had an extra one. I ended up with an extra one. So I was like, what can I do with this Teriel? I don't need it a lot of places. Well, Flying Vigilance 4/7, good that way. Tap, choose a creature card at random from an opponent's graveyard, put onto the battlefield under your control. The more things of my opponents I kill, the more things I steal from them, and keep getting creatures. Hence why Teriel is good, and why I put Teriel in here. Teriel's not the only one, but Teriel's the main reason I put white in here. There's a second one that I've got in here that works with it well. Xenagos, God of Revels. I got some of those gods back when Theros came out, and I got Xenagos. And Xenagos, I didn't have a great deck to put him in. My green-red deck, he wasn't great in. Because, yes, he's indestructible. The devotion to green and red is less than 7. It's not a creature. Getting 7 devotion, which is mana symbols, combined of green and red, add them up on all your permanents, and it's 7. That's pretty easy to do in this deck. So getting this to be a creature, indestructible, not terrible. But at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and XX until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So you double something's power, it gains haste. Cool? Is that super useful? No, but it's a 6/5 indestructible nonetheless, that I can very easily make it into a creature. Hence why it's here. Here is our other white one. Zurgo Helm Smasher. He's a haste. He attacks each combat if able. So when you play him, you got to be ready to attack. He's a 7/2. He's an indestructible as long as your turn. That's the important thing about him. Since I have to attack each turn if able, if it's my turn, he's indestructible. Meaning I can attack with him and I don't have to worry about him dying. If a creature he deals damage to dies, put a +1/+1 counter on him. So he keeps getting bigger. He's actually pretty damn good that way. That he can attack, not have to worry about him dying, and he gets bigger if he kills things. And he starts out as a 7/2, which is pretty insane. Granted, if it's not your turn, he is vulnerable but still, at that point in time, I've used him to the best of my abilities. Now, here's another one that I have two of. We've reached the second one, Wormcoil Engine, because I have that normal Wormcoil that we just see right there in the image, even though this is mirrored. Don't mind the mirroring. I also have the promo Wormcoil from the pre-release back in September 2010, because I went to the Scars of Mirrodin pre-release. It was the first pre-release I'd gone to since Apocalypse. Granted, I haven't been to a pre-release in some time, like 2 years, but that's just because of scheduling and money. Anyway, the Wormcoils, I love these guys. I needed a place to have them end up, and they didn't work in the decks I had them in from the Scars block, because they were good there, but they weren't good enough. And I wanted to keep those decks smaller, so they ended up getting kicked out of my Scars decks. And I didn't have any exact decks in my normal productive ones to use these in. They ended up here. They're Death Touch and Lifelink 6/6. So you sort of want to block them, but you don't want to block them. But if they put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you get 2 worm tokens, one with Death Touch, one with Lifelink. And that's why they can be very good. Really mean that way. Let me take a drink of water while we move on to this next one. Beacon of Unrest. Put target artifact or creature card from a graveyard, any graveyard, onto the battlefield under your control. You shuffle Beacon of Unrest into your library. It's just good. I get something back from any graveyard, put it into play under my control, and this goes back into my deck. Pretty simple, pretty effective, pretty useful. Rise of the Dark Realms. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So if we've been waging a long war and a lot of stuff dies, then I can just, be like, oh, a lot of things have died. I want to get, some creatures back. Oh, wait. I get everything from all the graveyards. Switch around. Now I'm in a superior position to crush you like a bug under my fist, because guess what? I have an army at my disposal I can just send down upon you. Rise of the Dark Realms is useful that way. Granted, I think I ended up with 2 of them, and that's why this one ended up here. I have to remember. Alright, we moved on to red sorceries. Insurrection. It's a win condition. Easy to say that. Untap all creatures. Gain control of them until end of turn. They gain haste. So I effectively steal every creature on the battlefield, and I can attack whoever with them. This is a way that I could kill off people using their own creatures. I could just, maybe use some kind of sacrificial abilities and get rid of all my opponent's creatures for some kind of bonus. There are a lot of reasons to steal everybody's creatures. But I can, for fun. Funsies. Funsies, I took them all. All mine now. Mine, not yours, yours. And just granted, it's on the turn, but, could murder people with it. Ooh, look at this. We're moving on to a common in this one. Blunt the Assault. I have 2 of them in here. So this is the 3rd card that we have that are multiples. You gain 1 life for each creature on the battlefield. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. It's a fog effect, with a little bonus that I gain life, equal to creatures. This could easily be replaced by another fog-based effect. So far, those other rares I talked about, replacing the Slagworm and replacing the Wormcoil, at least one of them, you can. There's no reason not to. Those are 2 extra rares that I could easily replace with something else that would be useful. Replacing this with something that does the exact same thing, also very easy. I like these because of the life game, because I have things to make it that I, spend life for stuff. Hence why, useful. Collective Voyage. So this one is an interesting one. It's a join forces. Starting with you, each player play a amount of mana. Each player searches his or her library for X basic lands, where X is the total number of mana paid this way, puts them on the battlefield, tapped, then shuffles his or her library. The only reason that this one might leave this deck is I only have 12 basic lands. So think about that. 12 is the maximum I can join forces with, and I would want to take advantage of a situation where my opponents can't gain nearly as much as me. but I would wait for that good time and basically increase my land amount more than them. So yes, it's useful, and yes, it can get me a whole bunch of lands. It's just I have to plan out when to cast it appropriately. It's a tough one to call when is good to use it, but when you do, bam, lots of land quickly. Overwhelming Stampede. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Give me a second here. Okay. Oh, just explaining trample. So yes, it's trample and +X. I was wondering what the card text on here was for. It's explaining trample. The thing is, because that's a static effect that they're getting +X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. I couldn't remember if it's that you would have to. Actually, let's go and read the errata. You can see, check out the errata down here. Check the power of creatures as overwhelming surge resolve. For example, if you control 2/1, a 2/2, and a 2/4, and a 4/1 creature, and a 5/5/5/6, each gets +6/6/5 trample. Okay, just making sure. So when you cast it, whatever the biggest creature you have is, you use its power and add XX to all your creatures equal to that power. So if I have that 10/9 Artisan of Kozilek, all my creatures get +10/+10 and trample until end of turn. And if I've been creating Saprolings, oh wait, they're big. Fertilot's pretty mean too. Or anything that grants it a big bonus. This is like Overrun, except better. Overrun gives everything +3/+3 in trample. So this is superior Overrun that I put in here. Alright, we're looking at the 4th card that's doubled up in this deck. 5th? That's the 6th. Oh, that's right, that's the 6th. God, I'm going to butcher this one. Peregrination. Ugh. Sometimes I hate pronouncing these things. Anyway, search your library from 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards. Put one in the battlefield tap. Put the other in your hand, and then scry. It's land searching. So I have 2 of them. You could easily replace one of these with another land search. I just liked it because it was search for 2, put 1 in the battlefield, and then scry. I thought that was useful. But yeah, land searching, easily replace that. So we're still at a point in time where we can easily replace a bunch of these cards and get down to a commander deck. Serene Remembrance. Shuffle Serene Remembrance and up to 3 cards from a single graveyard into their owner's libraries. It's putting cards from my graveyard back into my library. If for whatever reason I'm running lower on cards, this might be a way to keep me going. I do have card draw in here, so it could be a possibility that I outpace my opponent and I'm reaching the end of my deck, even though I have 100 cards. Especially if we're talking about if it was a commander game instead. So Serene Remembrance can be very useful there to keep you going. Splice and Twain. This is another one I have, well, 2 of. It's destroy an artifact or enchantment and draw a card. A green destroy artifact or enchantment, there's bajillion of them. I could throw a Naturalize in here to replace one of these, which would just do the same thing. I just like this one because it allows you to draw a card. And that's why I threw it in here. But yes, you could very easily put anything else in here. So, yep. Splice and Twain. We've reached the, that's the 4th or 5th. 1, 2... 3, 4. That's the 4th one, I think. I'll try to pay attention. I'm like losing my mind. That might have been the 5th. But the assault. Oh yeah, 5th. Sorry. See, I lost my mind already. Isn't that fun? Triumph the Hordes. As much as Overwhelming Stampede is a good winning condition, so is this one. Creatures you control get +1/+1 trample and infect. This is the only way to grant my creatures infect, which is they deal damage as in the form of -1/-1 counters and players in the form of poison counters, where no matter what your life is, 10 poison counters, you will lose the game. Period. So yes, Triumph of the Hordes is a gross card because it gives all your stuff trample, gives them +1/+1, and it means I don't have to care about my opponent's life total. I just have to deal them 10. and they're done. Also, all my creatures shrink my opponent's creatures now because they have Infect. So the more of them you block, the smaller your creatures get. So regardless if mine survive or not, I have weakened you. I've eaten up some of your life. Triumph the Hordes is wonderful in that way. Let's talk about the Planeswalkers in this deck, because I have a bunch of Planeswalkers. Starting with Sorin Markov. Of course, Sorin Markov, he ticks up for 2, deals 2 damage to target creature or player, you gain 2 life. Ticks down for 3, changes the player's life total become 10. The opponent's life total become 10. Or tick down for 7, you control target player during that player's next turn. Always a dick move to do. Stealing someone's turn and controlling their turn is a dick thing to do, and I put it in this deck. It's one of the most dick things to do, and I have it right here. And this isn't the only place to do it in this deck. So, sorry, I'm kind of a jerk by doing this, but Sorin, I wanted a place for him, and he was fine here. Alright, we have Chandra Nalaar and the Duel Decks Anthology version of her. Tick up 1 does 1 damage target player, tick down X does X damage target creature, tick down 8 does 10 damage to target player and each creature he or she controls. I'd probably go for the tick down 8, unless I'm really desperate to kill a creature. Chandra's useful. She's a little bit of burning, which a little bit of burns kind of abilities can be very nice. Chandra the Firebrand. I have a second Chandra. I just had an extra one and didn't know where to put her. Tick up 1, deals 1 damage, target creature or player. Ticks down 2. When the next instant or sorcery you cast this turn, copy it, and I can select more targets. That doesn't seem like a lot, but think about this. I use that. I cast Beacon of Unrest. I cast it twice. I cast Overwhelming Stampede. I cast it twice. Pregnation. Cast it twice. Serene Remembrance. Cast it twice. Splice and Dane. Cast it twice. Triumph of the Horde. Cast it twice. Granted, that's not a huge amount, but that's something great. Also, the 6 damage divided does deal 6 damage to each of up to 6 target creatures and players. Just does 6 damage to 6 things. Is very good too for a tick down of 6, which is also not particularly difficult to get to. So Chandra, the Firebrand, is good in here. Garruk Wildspeaker. I have the Duel Decks Anthology version of him also. Tick up 1, untap 2 lands. Tick down 1, put a 3/3 beast creature token in the battlefield. Tick down 4, your creatures get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. He can get the overrun, and the overrun is a very useful one, and you can very easily get that with him. That trample is something that's key to winning with this deck to a degree, because it makes that you have a lot of these interesting, powerful creatures and gets them just a little bit bigger and gives them that trample, and you can use that to your advantage. Grook's good that way. Hey, and one more. Xenagos the Reveler. The Planeswalker Ghost, basically I can have the Planeswalker Xenagos and the God Xenagos out at the same time, and the universe can implode, but I could have it. So you pick up a 1, and you add X mana of any combination of red or green to your mana pool, where X is the number of creatures you control. I have a whole bunch of creatures, I created a whole bunch of tokens, I get a whole bunch of mana. For 0, put a 2/2 red-green Satyr token in the battlefield with haste, so I get a Satyr. Or for 6, exile top 7 cards of your library. You may put any number of creatures or lands from among them onto the battlefield. The tick down one is actually a big one. I probably would never use it. The mana production on this dude and the creatures are what's useful for him. And they can be very useful. A lot of those X spells, I can get a lot of mana with him there. Exquisite Blood. This is part of a combo of 2 cards, which I actually have in here. It's a fun combo that you can notice, and I will talk about. When an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. A very simple, static kind of thing. My opponent loses 2 life, I gain 2 life. Important note that damage becomes loss of life. If I deal 2 damage to my opponent, if that 2 damage is not prevented, that counts as 2 loss of life to them. You can prevent damage, but it becomes loss of life if it is not prevented. Tricky thing there. So whenever my opponent, because there is specifically things that say loss of life and damage, and things that particularly say prevent damage. Loss of life is the final product. That's an important thing about Magic, of that distinction, which I don't think they've changed that distinction. So good on them. Anyway, here's its sister card. Sanguine Bond. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Now wait. My opponent just lost 2 life and I gained 2 life. But then, because I gained 2 life, my opponent loses 2 life. But then, because my opponent lost 2 life, I gained 2 life. And back and forth until my opponent dies. I get these two out together. Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. My opponent dies as soon as they take a single point of damage. A single loss of life. They're gone. Each opponent. So if I'm playing multiplayer and I have both of these out, oh ho ho, I just have to hurt one of my opponents for all of them to die. Completely and utterly. They are a mean combination of cards that I have in here. Rage Reflection. Now again, I'm showing the Lorwyn version of it because this is the Planeswalker deck version of it. It's got the M symbol. Creatures you control have double strike. Double strike is wonderful because it's first strike and normal damage at the same time. I hit for some extra first strike damage, quickly getting it in, and then I do normal one. Oh, did I give all my stuff trample? So now it's hitting, most likely killing you with the first strike damage, and then trampling over with the rest of the damage into my opponent. I love Rage Reflection. I have it in a bunch of ones, and guess what I did? I ended up with an extra one. I got all my Lorwyn Rage Reflections back when I first learned with them, and then I got one of those Planeswalker decks and got one, and it's like, well, where the heck am I going to put that? Here. Awakening Zone. It's token production and mana production. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn that you can sacrifice for a colorless mana. So I get a creature every turn. I could sacrifice them for mana. It has a lot of uses. Awakening Zone is a good one for getting both mana and creatures. We've finally reached the card that goes with Hellekite Charger. If you guys don't remember, Hellekite Charger, who, when you attacked, you could tap 7 mana, 5 colors, 2 red, get an extra combat this turn, untapping all your creatures, attacking again, and you can keep doing that as long as you have the mana. Well, guess what we can combine it with? Bear Umbra. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2. Whenever this creature taps, untap all lands you control. I attack. I tap 7. Oh, I'm getting an extra turn. I attack again. I untap those 7. I tap those 7 to attack again. Repeat infinitely. I have infinite attack phases. And it is a totem armor, meaning if this enchantment does go away, my Hellekite Charger does remain surviving. And I can get one last attack in if somehow they manage to kill it. But basically, I can use Hellekite Charger to get infinite attacks. Because, sure, why not? Beastmaster Ascension. Ooh, I love Beastmaster Ascension, especially when I can create a lot of tokens. When a creature you control attacks, put a quest counter on it. Hey, I have things like, Zulog, is he? God, I'm bad with his name. Zurgo, who I can attack with free each turn. Keep putting tokens on him. As long as this has 7 or more tokens on it, my creatures get +5/+5. My 1/1 Saplings and my 0/1 Eldrazi tokens, they're big and mean. Big and mean and can crush you like a bug. Let's move on to some artifacts with Darksteel Plate. It's indestructible, and equipped creature is indestructible. Pretty simple. For 5 mana, I can make any of my target creatures indestructible. If I have a certain creature which is going to be very useful to whatever I'm planning, I can make it indestructible with Darksteel Plate. It's a protector for one of my creatures, and I can change what creature I'm protecting if I get another creature which I feel out is better suited. I could throw this onto my Hellekite Charger and basically get those infinite turns and not have to worry about you killing it. Except unless you have something special that exiles it. That's why it's good. Deathrender. Ooh. This is one that I put in here specifically because I have the Eldrazi spawn tokens. Specifically because I can have those. Equipped creature goes +2/+2. Whenever a equipped creature dies, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield and attach Deathrender to it. Now that means I could sacrifice an Eldrazi spawn and and something that's in my hand gets Death Render attached to it, and it's in the battlefield. Bam. I can easily just get a creature card out for no mana. And wait, that Eldrazi Spawn I sacrificed gives me 1 colorless mana, meaning if I wanted to attach this to another one, I only have to tap 1 land. So for 1 land, I get a creature out from my hand. For any color, too. It could be colorless mana. I get a creature out from my hand. Now, granted, I could also throw this onto a certain creature that I just want to keep attacking with, and you're like, what does he have in his hand that he really wants to play, that he's throwing this creature at me? Am I just going to kill that? Or am I going to try to absorb the damage? Ooh, there's a lot of options there that make it very good. The Dragon Throne of Tarkir. Equipped creature has Defender, and for 2, tap it. Other creatures you control get trample on XX until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. I throw this on to something like, Verdant Force. It's a 7/7. I could then have it tap and give all my other creatures +7/+7 and trample until end of turn. Granted, I can't attack with my Verdant Force, but why would I? I'm creating tokens that now I can make into 8/8s and tramples. Yeah, the Dragon Throne of Tarkir is another pretty big win condition type card. Eldrazi Monument. Creatures you control of +1/+1 have flying and indestructible at the beginning of your upkeep. Sacrifice a creature. If you can't, sacrifice Eldrazi Monument. So I have to give a creature to it every turn. But wait! Eldrazi Spawn tokens. Saprolings, which I can produce a lot of. I can just make all my stuff indestructible and flying. Isn't that special? Isn't that nice? Uh-oh. Come back here, Eldrazi Monument. It tried to escape from the deck. It knew it was too good for it. Gilded Lotus. So, here's our first bit of extra any color mana production. Here's where we're first getting white. Tap 3 color of any color to your mana pool. Pretty simple. It is a 5 mana cost to put it out originally, but it's mana ramp. That's a pretty decent mana ramp. And it's any color, meaning that if I splash in something like those 2 white cards, this is a way to possibly play it. Not the only way, but one of them. Mage Slayer. When an equipped creature attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to defending player. Oh wait, I put that on one of those Hydras, which I can make really, really big with a lot of mana. Now, when that Hydra attacks, before combat damage is dealt, it deals damage equal to its power to defending player. So, off the bat, my 15/15 Hydra deals you 15 damage, and then you have to worry about its attack. Do-do-do-do-do-do, murder you, murder you. It gives everything like an instant strike through that's really good. Mage Slayer is a really good thing to throw in here, and that's why I put it in. Now, here's where I'm probably going to lose a couple of people because it's a jerk move to do, but Mindslaver. You can sacrifice it. You control target player during that player's next turn. It's like Sorin, only it's an artifact I can sacrifice to do it, and it costs less mana to use it. So it's actually a little easier. By the time I can play this, I can use it the next turn, because it's 6 mana to play it, 4 to cast it, and guess what? If I'm controlling your turn, I'm going to screw you over. You know that's going to happen. So, Mindslaver. Moonsilver Spear. Now, I do have a promo version of it, which is foil, but for this one, I put in my foil rare of it. So I actually have a whole bunch of Moonsilver Spears. I ended up with a whole lot of them. So, it's expensive to use, but it has a very good ability. 4 to equip, 4 to cast. Equip creature has first strike. That's pretty awesome. When equipped creature attacks, put a 4/4 white angel token with flying in the battlefield. So every time I attack with the creature I'm putting this on, I get an angel. That is not attacking, fortunately. But I basically can throw this onto something like a Saproling, and guess what? My Saproling, oh, you might kill it. But guess what? I get an angel in place of it. Oh, too bad. I lost that Saproling and got an angel. Tears to the eyes. Oh, no. Or an Eldrazi Spawn, because I can attack with it, and then if I want to, I can just sacrifice it anyway. Nim Deathmantle. Equipped creature that gets +2/+2 has Intimidate, meaning it can only be blocked by creatures that share a color with it, and is a black zombie. So, I mean, it makes it black, so it can only be blocked by black creatures. That's the important thing. I think it's or artifact still, because it's like fear, only it's specifically the color that has Intimidate. Sorry, pardon me. Anyway, whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, that means any non-token creature, I may pay 4. If I do, I return that creature to the battlefield with Nim Death Mantle attached to it. Something dies. For 4 mana, when it dies, I get it back. That means that Zurgo, who's been annoying you, man, maybe he will lose all his counters. How to get him back? For 4 mana. And then he's a 9/4. And if he dies, pay the 4 mana again, bring him back again. Yep, Nim Death Mantle. It's a good one. Hey, guess what? I got 2 Soul Rings. They're both from the same commander sets, because I think that was the second set of commander decks. I scrapped those. I didn't really like those. The first set of commander decks I really liked a lot, and some of the commander decks after that I haven't scrapped yet, because I haven't I'm considering whether I'm keeping them or not. I have never decided. So I do have like the monocolor ones. I think I have like, God, because this one was from 2013, and there's in 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's been 6 of them. I at least have 3 full sets of those 6. Maybe 4. I just got the 2017 Commanders. All of them. I think I might be missing 15 and 16. So I might be missing 2 sets of the Commander. Maybe. I can't remember. I might just be missing the 1. The 16. They're harder to get then. But 2 Soul Rings. For 1 mana, they tap for 2. It's really good mana ramp. It's just colorless, but it's really good mana ramp. Staff of Nim. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, and you can tap to deal 1 damage to creature player. It's I draw more cards, and I can tap to deal damage to people. Staff of Nim is really good that way. It's a nice little one to put in here. Sword of Feast and Famine. So a quick creature has protection from black and green. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and you untap all lands you control. This is yet another way that I could get infinite turns with, let's say, the Helicite Charger. Or, if I make something unblockable until end of turn, which I will show you I can do, I can use the Sword of Feast and Famine combined with the Helicite Charger, that I get all my lands untapped each turn then. And I can keep attacking infinite turns using the Sword of Feast and Famine. It's another way of doing it. And that's the last of the 67 cards that we have. Let's talk about the lands we have. Alright. So we talked about the 6, since I had the 2 Soul Rings, that was the 6th one. That was the 6th one. 6 cards. And the second Soul Ring, yeah, it's really good though, but I don't know if it's banned or anything, so I might have to replace that. Oh, where's this Soul Ring? That's Staff of Nim. Doesn't say if it's banned or restricted. It does not. Oh, hey, look at that. Sets and legality. Commander's legal. Vintage is restricted. Legacy it's banned. I'm guessing because it's technically not modern. Huh. Well, I really should remove one from here. And then it makes it technically not a modern deck, because I don't know why I guess the Commander stuff is technically not legal in modern decks, even though it's the modern version of it. That's a weird thing. Sometimes some of the legality in this is very weird in Magic. Let me just tell you that now. As someone that's more of a legacy/vintage player, I get caught up in trying to figure that out sometimes. So don't mind me. This isn't exactly like a perfect science here. And I play these more for casual than anything. But if you wanted to make it a Commander deck, you could just pull that one out there, and then you don't have to worry about any kind of set legality anyway. Anyway, Akum Refuge. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. It taps for black and red. Pretty simple. Bloodfell Caves. It is literally the exact same thing, except with a different name. Same thing, different name. Dragonskull Summit. Got 1 of these. When it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain. Taps for red or black. Okay. So far, we've just been having single ones. Grim Backwood. Taps for a colorless, or for 2 colors, a black and a green. You can sacrifice a creature to draw a card. I sacrifice a sapling. I sacrifice a Eldrazi spawn. I draw a card. I sacrifice something I stole from an opponent that I really don't care about. Isolated Chapel. Hey, look. a way to get white mana. It's our second way to get white mana. There's, in fact, 6 cards which can get white mana, I think, in the entire deck. Only 6. Which is not great, but still. Isolated Chapel. Kazandu Refuge. It's enters the battlefield tapped. You gain life for red, green. I have 3 of these, though. So here's our first 2 lands that we want to switch out for another enters the battlefield tap, red-green combination of something or other. There are a whole lot of them, so it would be pretty easy to replace these with something else. Also, I don't, you know, it's like, there's the other version of it from, like, Bloodfell Cave here. You could replace one of those with that. Another one, you could just replace something that's similar, but maybe you don't gain the 1 life, you gain something else for tapping for those 2 colors. County Garden. Again, this is one that I have 2 of. Enters battlefield tap. You can tap for a green, you get a plant token. I can at least just remove one of these for a forest and just have the 1 to get a plant token. Care Keep. Taps for a colorless, or for a colorless and a red, you can tap it to put a 0/1 Kobold token in the battlefield. It's tokens. They're pretty lame tokens because they're 0/1 tokens and they're called Kobolds of Care Keep. But it's Kobold tokens and it's creatures that you can throw out, which you can make big with a lot of the stuff we've seen in this deck. You can make them giant. Mosswort Bridge. It's got Hideaway, which means Hideaway is always an interesting one. When it enters the battlefield, it does so tapped, and when it does, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, put the rest on the bottom of your library. And then if you pay a green and tapping it, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if creatures you control have a total power of 10 or greater. So if I have 10 power with the creatures, which is pretty easy in this deck, I just look at the top 4, choose something, and I can play it. Then. Hey, here's where Unblockable comes in. Rogue's Passage. For 4 mana, target creature is unblockable this turn. This turn, it's unblockable. Meaning if I get multiple attacks with the same unblockable creature, it's still unblockable. Isn't that wonderful? That Helicite Charger I keep attacking with, and I keep untapping. I really only have to attack with that Helicite Charger alone and use the Rogue's Passage. As long as I have 11, well, actually I only had to have 7 mana open, because I tap the 4, make it unblockable, attack with it, with Bear Umbra, all my lands untap, I can tap the 7 to get the extra attack, and then I get the infinite attacks against all my opponents and murder them because they can't block the dragon. Womp, womp. Savage Lands. Taps for a black, red, and green. Pretty simple. I might use some of the other combinations of colors with extra mana. Like there is a red, green, white one. I might throw one of those in here. The black, red, white one I think exists. Yeah, the black, red, white. Those 2 could replace some of the lands in here to add a little bit of white in here. And they are pretty good because they just enter the battlefield tap and then top for 3 colors. I might also, I've got 2 of these Tainted Woods. I could do like a tainted, whatever the Plains one is, the white one. So it taps for a colorless, or if I have a swamp, taps for a black and a green. I have 2 of these. So that's a good one. Temple of the False Gods. It taps for 2 mana of 2 colorless mana, and you can only have this if you have 5 or more lands. Which, I mean, it counts as a land, so as long as I'm not playing this in the first 4 lands I play, it's adding 2 colorless mana, which is actually really easy to do, technically, when you think about it. Playing this within those first ones, you could, but it's not something you want to. Now, here's another set of, I have a whole bunch of them that I would have to replace some of them. Windscarred Crag. Taps for a red or white, enters the battlefield to gain 1 life. I have 4 of them in here, because this is a lot of my white mana. Again, 3 of these could probably be replaced. There are some more red-white lands. Those 2 lands I talked about, which are the 3 lands, which tap for white. Or something else like I could get a green and white land and replace one of these very easily because I have green in this deck. The green-white lands. I only have the red here because a lot of the fire breathing and stuff requires red, and that's why I thought it was a little better. And finally, we have our basic lands. We have our 4 Coalition Swamps. The playset of them. all 4 different types of swamp images from Phyrexia vs. Coalition, which was the original deck. This was the Phyrexia deck, of course. Mountains. I have the 4 different images of mountains from the premium deck, Fire and Lightning. Yep, I got the premium deck Fire and Lightning for pretty cheap. And I got all the premium lands, so they're all special foil mountains. I threw them in here because I thought that would be awesome to put them in here. And I did. Play set of them. And then finally, forests. 4 of them also, making our 12 basic lands. I have the 2 different Phyrexia Coalition ones. 2 different random ones. A Commander one and a Avasia Returns land. Just to make up 4 forests. Including the last 2 Phyrexia Coalition cards in here. So there's 6. And they're all the basic lands. All the other cards have been replaced long ago because they were not good enough for this deck as it evolved. After 7 years of evolution, which I haven't updated this in like a year. Think about that. There's a whole lot of cards which might be able to go in here and make this better now. And if I do end up updating it severely, I'll let you guys know. I'll let you know what I changed out and stuff. I'll probably do a special deck delve of the new updated version of it. Since we've been updating the designed decks there, you know, if I do find something that's just awesome to throw in here, we'll talk about it back in that time. Anyway, so, I think we're good for today. We've been going for about an hour, and we finished up with talking about what's in this deck. Awesome. I hope everyone's been having a great time here with me, learning about this deck I made. It's a really cool deck. It's actually one of my favorite ones to play in multiplayer because it is a slower deck, because it's got a lot of big mean things. I normally just refer to it as my rare deck, but the title I kind of threw together for this one that makes sense. You know, the rare deck, that doesn't sound cool, but the what I called it here today, the Remanents of the Coalition, because it has 6 cards out of 100 which are Remanents of Phyrexia versus Coalition decks, which that's where this originated from, combining the 2 of those, taking the red and green from the Coalition deck and the black from the Phyrexia deck and throwing them together in one deck. Because the white and the blue and stuff, it was too rainbowy on the Coalition deck, and I'm like, white, blue, you're gone. The others, they remained. They remained and built a pretty powerful deck here. 60 rares out of all the cards. Think of that. 60 of them. 40 non-rare cards, including 12 basic lands. So there's really only 28 other cards which are not rare in this entire deck. Bam. About a quarter of it matters. That's not rare. But, alright everyone. I'm going to stop here for the recording for you people on the YouTube side. If you have any questions, comments about the deck, about my making it, I will start putting those deck lists up. I just haven't had a chance to. I'm going to see if over this weekend I can throw up some of the deck lists associated with it in the description below on the YouTube side. And again, if you have anything you want to say about them, any kind of questions, anything like that, just leave them in the comments of the YouTube channel. I'll answer them the best way I can. I'll be back next week. I will try to actually put up one of my surveys for what deck I'm going to work on next week up actually tomorrow, and hopefully that'll go up through Thursday, and we'll find out what deck we're going to be working on then, whether it's design, commander, or something else, or block deck, which I'll probably do a Scars Den then. Alright, so let's stop the... So I'll see you all later, YouTube side of folks.